Thanks for coming back in, Gunther. Let's see if the other guys manage. Yes, Peter is coming too. Very good.
Good morning.
Morning, morning.
Good morning.
Not been too many hours since I last saw you, Peter. Or Catherine.
I enjoyed your presentation. It was very good.
Thank you, thank you. It was a very, very friendly environment. It felt really good to be there. Well, I found that quite impressive. So now we're just waiting for Raphael to come back in, I think. There he is. Thank you. Raphael's also back. So yeah, I think it would be good if we do what we talked about on Monday, which is spec this thing. So have you all had a look at the visualmeta.info website recently?
Yep.
Okay, so the way it's structured now is introduction and then showing traditional book versus visual meta, just to really make it clear to people the kind of thing it is. Then we talk the robust potential and further information. In further information, we have the implementation notes we talked about, and we also have a structure. So what I'm thinking today, we should probably work on the structure. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Or so as in, do you guys think it's best to talk about the methodology behind it for adding something, or basically just make a better demo?
I'm always down to upgrading demos. I feel like that's always a nice idea.
So Adam, you had one big problem with this visual meta start, because you said, I think I remember, it looks like BibTeX, but it ain't. And I think that's totally fine. Psychologically, all that's meant to do is give familiarity with something added, because the key is, of course, the last one, because that's what tells the reading software, look for this at the end of the document. If that's there, then you parse backwards, so you don't waste time doing the whole document. So that has to be there, and it has to be lost. Is it okay if we accept this funky looking thing that isn't really BibTeX? Or do we need different characters?
We don't really need different characters. We should just clearly communicate, and you do right now, clearly communicate that this is a historical reason that it's called this. That's fine, I think. I think it's slightly more, what isn't specified right now is the other thing, how you the brackets and where they should end and start and so on, that isn't specified right now, and it's good to just say that it should look like this. And
How about this alternate notation?
What's that, Peter?
Well, here's what my lockdown notation would be the equivalent in the chat text.
Oh, chat text. Okay, I can't see that so easily. Let me see. I guess I go.
Is it just visual meta capitalized with a colon after?
The idea is you go into cap lock with a colon on the right side, and then you close a tag by a colon in the exact same text on the left side.
This is ridiculous, guys. I'm in what's called sharing view mode, and I cannot see the text, the chat. Okay. Oh, hang on. Let's try this. Chat. Oh, this is really bizarre. Okay, mumble, you go on while I try to figure out the basics of digital life.
I have a thought. I haven't had a chance to read the latest thing in full yet, but thinking of Fred's question, just as I logged in, and thinking of the conversation I was having with Dave Miller one or two earlier today, was in a sense, you sort of need two parallel descriptions, because there are two audiences who may be the same person for some people, but for most are quite different. There's a purely technical audience who wants a really quite hard-edged binary description, because that's all they know and understand. That's their engagement. And then there's some more general humanist thing of saying, look, what are we doing? Why is it there? Why should, or why might you ask to use it or get someone to implement it? So the implementation thing, they sort of want to go together, but I don't think there are very few people who will sort of basically will like and want both, because the wider description will infuriate somebody who just wants to know what has to be implemented. And they may not care at all what it does. Someone's just said, implement this, so they need to go and look up the spec. But I think the more important thing in the round is the wider thing, which is to sort of explain what we're doing. And I think back to the earliest conversation, which was, this was an attempt to try and basically debug the very broken citation cycle, because most people either can't be bothered or don't know how to cite properly in a way that means the person who then uses their citation, doubtless without even looking it up, just makes it even worse. And so it goes on. Whereas what we actually want are things where whatever they put on the paper for the reader, that squirreled away at the end is something in which we have far more trust, which will allow either them or a computer to dereference it to the correct source. That's the problem we were trying to fix. The fact that it goes through paper, I don't recall actually being the original problem, though it neatly does sort of solve that. And I pick up and I take the point that I think Adam made about that we need to be careful about the font so that you can actually OCR the key characters in it. And it might be that we want to say to people that regardless of the rest, and even if it's done very small, this probably wants to be in a monospace font. Might be a sensible thing to do, because that's got the greatest chance of surviving OCR, I would imagine.
I'm not sure about that. I'm just going to look up a version number here. That's why I'm on this other page.
Which part, Frode?
This, well, see.
Monospace font or all the, or better referencing?
Well, it was originally just BibTeX at the end. So Mark is absolutely right. That is how it started. And that has to be the very, very basic part of it. Okay, 1014, okay.
Because the other missing part, and the other thing, just, in a sense, although maybe it's only of historical interest now, is that part of the other thing was, this was Chris Guttridge's idea, was to say, well, if you want people to adopt it, one thing that ought to be appealing to publishers is that if papers are generated with better referencing, then they can apply tools they already have to better cross-referencing. Obviously, they'll go make their money off that, and we can have a separate view as to whether that's a good thing or not. But in the broad, it means that slowly we flush through the really generally poor quality of citation that goes on at the moment. So that, especially as we move to a more digital age, where we want to use more non-human affordances to find this information for us, using really badly human written citation information is not helping us at all.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's a few things we have to solve specifically now. One of them is, so Peter, you are writing a few ways of wrapping this. Why can we not use @article soft brackets or funny brackets? Why do you think?
I think it's just purely a psychological thing. People see that it looks a little too much like computer code and freak out. Somebody I've seen, they see anything that looks like it's a formal mathematical oriented notation and their brain just toggles off. I don't know why, but it's like a psychological thing. And they think that looks like code. So if it looks a little less like code, they're more likely to be able to digest it. But again, purely psychological. It makes no difference parsing wise. It's totally irrelevant.
Okay, that's a fair point. And that's why I think we will keep what we have, because this isn't intended to be read by people. But, the user of the document should never have to look at this. Same as when you open a book, you don't look at the copyright page. But it should be possible if you need to. Does that make sense? So I think it's okay to keep it everything in the BibTeX kind of layouts. But there was another point that was brought up on Monday. That is, this doesn't actually support full BibTeX. That's why I've written it up here in a heading, just to get the discussion on that. Because what I am saying is that what is here is correctly normal, just pasted BibTeX. How do we communicate that? And how do we communicate what the minimum BibTeX stuff should be? What do you think, guys?
I've got a thought. I mean, that's one of the things where I think that should be a linked and dereferenceable resource that explains that. Because if you try and put it needs a well thought through explanation, and that explanation won't be short enough to go in there. But if it's on a URI that was as persistent as we can make it, I think that's a reasonable pragmatic compromise.
Well,
because we will need, as this fleshes out, to explain, for people who are just terribly focused on format X or format Y, who will want to go into battle about why it's not compliant. That's not the point here. What we're saying is, and you can indeed add to it, but we will need to have a statement that explains what it is and why things are or are not fully compliant with standard X or Y.
Yeah.
And I don't think that can fit in the document, because that's got to be properly written out so that people can see the argument. They may not like it, but at least they can understand it.
Yeah, but we're dealing with two different audiences here. One audience is someone who's gone to visual-meta.info and clicked on this, and they want to see if it's bullshit or something they want to implement, right? So in this web page, on the top here, it's got structure and it's a normal human introduction that we all have to agree on. And then we have an example, followed by what I call description. The description is actually in the visual meta at the very beginning. So this is for someone in 1,000 years or whatever.
But do you mean that this description should go in every visual meta document that I produce as well, or?
Yes.
Because now it's very, very long, and yeah, Jason is misspelled right now. Jason.
Problematic for blog
for the
posts.
ages. For 1,000 years it will be, and they try to find the Josen.
I have a very high talent when it comes to misspelling. So I would like to say it was to catch you guys out, but this is me just writing it as a chatty way. So we have to do this together. But if you look at my presentation from yesterday, so you've probably seen most of this. I'll just do a little bit. So this is how I present it. So we have the introduction, which is just a statement of what it is. Then we have what is actually BibTeX. And even that is a bit contentious, because not all authoring and reader software will deal with all the fields. So we kind of have to make that clear. Then we have the structural, but this is actually what we're doing now. When you export, see this huge amount of text that is actually on top there. It's a boilerplate. But remember, it's tiny when it's rendered on the page.
Yeah, but this may not conform to if someone is going to append this in their document, the publisher, they may not want that full text. They may only want a minimal BibTeX entry.
That's fine. As far as I'm concerned, if you're going to have, what is it? There is, Dave Miller talked about this thing that you all know about, open documents, whatever.
Open hypermedia, was it?
No, different stars or different levels, like 5 stars.
Oh, the 5, yeah, the Berners-Lee sort of 5-star open data.
That's it, open data. So if someone wants to have a 5-star visual meta implementation, it will have this. But I'm not going to come with a shotgun to their offices if they don't have that. I think it's really, really important, but visual meta will still function without it. It's just, one of those principles of, if we really believe that these documents should be parsable intelligently, it takes up no data space and very little space. And I've written it really, really badly, very amateurish. What this is as described for anyone who would like to support it's this and that. We have, I understand some of these issues. You guys understand others. So if we could actually together figure out a way to write, it's a bit of a mission statement as well as an implementation statement.
Oh, I have one other issue I'd like to raise. Could we include a convention of ending a field with a question mark if you're not sure whether the value in that field is accurate or not? Either that or in parentheses SP if you're not sure of the spelling. For instance, sometimes I'll have something I want to cite someone and I won't be sure the exact spelling of the last name. So I'll put down what I think the spelling is, but then I'll put SP in parens right after it, just to remind myself later on that the spelling might be mangled. Because there's value in the partial information, but you want someone to know that the information is partial and not to be completely trusted. So it gets some halfway to tracing down the reference, even though you can't go all the way at the time that you're writing the document.
I'm not, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I'm not sure if BibTeX structure allows that. In other words, I don't know whether that would parse. I think that's something we'd have to test. Because I do think it's a really good idea, because actually formally noting that you're passing partial information is really useful. Because you're emphatically saying that I am, I'm not saying this is canonically right. I don't know. I'm assuming it is. But when you actually definitely say, yeah, as you said, spelling whatever, I think that's incredibly useful. Because it's going to help when you've got to deconflict multiple versions, for instance, of the same thing coming from different sources. You're least likely to pick the one that's going to be, saying it's got a possible spelling error. The problem with that is in BibTeX, it breaks it looks for the outer set. BibTeX is basically an outer set of curly brackets, then a list of key equals, either in quotes or in curly brackets, values. So if you put something after the comma, that will break the parser, I'm pretty certain.
Yeah, but you can have inner nested brackets. You could.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. It's probably an
but
implementation thing, and I think it's really worth us looking into. I like the idea.
Oh, just a quick thought. Now, regarding to the description. So, I mean, we're still deciding how actually the form should look like. But once everything is settled to a satisfying degree, I think there should be a grammar specification of the form. So I think that would be perhaps helpful.
I recommend a parsing expression grammar, since that'll give you one canonical unambiguous part.
Exactly, something like that. Yes.
So okay, now we're getting into the interesting bit. So what I think, we need to find a way here immediately to say what is minimum and what is additional, right? So,
well,
yeah, go on.
Just one thought. I think, it's a pretty tough decision, but just to pick up on what Mark has mentioned when he discussed, we had a discussion with Mark Miller, right? So as far as addition and information goes, or data, I think it would be nice to have an address for the vision meta description, such that if you want to have additional information, you can just ask the resource in the network. And I mean, you might even support other formats. So if somebody is not comfortable with whatever format we come up with, it would be just a matter of asking that description to render itself in, I don't know, whatever format seems is suitable, JSON, XML, anything like that. So I think there needs to be So there's one part that is frozen that goes into the book, and there's another part that is quite open and could be extended in the future, I think. And that's why these descriptions they need an address, a unique address. Yeah.
Because
So
is the document structure written in BibTeX as well, or is it written in markup? Because one of the things that might confuse people now that stop to think about it is that, okay, if I don't understand BibTeX and I'm not doing any citation, but I very much would like to record the structure of my book, for instance, or my paper or article I'm writing, then I might think it useful to use visual meta, but I might not understand BibTeX. I don't think it really matters as long as we explain it. But the reason I mention is it goes back to the thing about what's minimal and what is the core format. In our broader, more sort of in our broader description, both in the technical and the sort of humanist one, I would say that we need to explain briefly, just to say, why we started with BibTeX. It doesn't, the point is, it doesn't really matter that it's this rather than something else. We had to start somewhere. This is, broadly a wide thing. So it needs to be seen from that perspective, not that it's saying that this is better than some other format, and you can put other formats inside that, and that's part of the description.
So custom extension. I think that's where a lot of you guys already are. If you would like to include further. So what do I write about that, guys?
Well, if you want to include metadata in other structured, defined and structured formats, that can be done, but then it needs to, the block that you add needs to have something to tell a parser. So it needs to be digitally dereferenced.
UI server, low battery.
Oh, I gotta go plug in. One
Alert
second.
from battery. Low battery.
It's Friday. Low battery all round.
Okay. For example, to add Dublin Core. This is like the easiest example. Dublin Core is, did I have that in here? Yeah. Okay, because I think now this has a little bit more of the skeleton, so you guys can really choose what to go to town on. So maybe today we focus on these sections here.
Mm-hmm.
Minimum requirements, optional, and custom extensions, right?
Okay, on AC now.
Good. I'm not sure if you heard, Peter, but I suggested that today we focus on these three blocks: minimum requirements, optional, and custom extensions. And the key is really for me to listen to you guys and write down what should be there.
So I thought, looking, for instance, at the thing about Dublin Core is that even if you know what Dublin Core, well, it doesn't tell you that you need to, if you want to add data in Dublin Core format. So you're not, you see what I mean? And so basically you're going to net, if you want to nest, because that's effectively what you're doing, you're nesting inside the overall visual meta.
Hang on, Mark, this is really important what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, someone may have a better technical description of it, but what we're saying is, if you want to use, some other a block of some other format nested inside visual meta, it needs to start with a description. But the point is, if in 100 years' time or 1,000 years' time somebody doesn't know what Dublin Core is, just saying at Dublin Core won't help them unless they can dereference what Dublin Core is. So you may need to, the first thing inside that inside that bracket may need to be the URI of the spec.
I'm not,
Yes.
I think
Because Dublin Core is not really a format. It's you can represent it in many different formats, in XML or JSON or yeah, in whatever format you want to represent it, or BibTeX.
well, Dublin Core is quite different though. I mean, let's just have a look here.
Well, we're confusing two things here. There's the Dublin Core is a structured set of metadata,
Yeah.
but the way in which it's stored, as Adam said, can be done in a number of ways, which looked at as code would look different. And they're all valid as long as the parser knows what to do with it. So the point, that goes back to this thing of, so almost the first thing you need to say inside any custom block is something that the computer, the parser, can go away and look at, say, what am I going to be looking at next? And that's probably the thing that would tell you, right, that, you know, it's good Dublin Core in JSON, or it's Dublin Core in XML.
Give me 1 minute. Sorry, guys, please.
Does that make sense, Adam?
Yep, absolutely.
Maybe the first thing should be a link to machine readable grammar then.
Well, that's sort of what I was thinking, like, you know, a DTD or whatever. And I mean, the terminology will vary from thing to thing. And it may mean that what one of the first things people want to do if they want to leverage this is they may need to make sure that the format they're going to use has some actually accessible and persistent reference.
Yeah. But I think the point is also true for BibTeX, because there are so many fields and that have different, people have different conventions. So we need to specify what we think is the convention here. And also BibTeX, you can, we have the bracket standard here, having brackets.
And there are custom BibTeX fields too.
Yeah, that as well, but still for the basic, you can have a syntax without brackets, you can have a syntax with double quotes, and so you can't really say that we have a syntax specified here. We don't even, so we should really specify a bit more. So we could have a subset of BibTeX syntax that is mostly valid, or we can be.
Yeah, well, that would be the visual meta eating its own dog food, in the sense that it too would start with a thing saying, yes, this, you know, this looks like BibTeX, but it's BibTeX under the following, you know, under the following sort of formatting things. Because you're quite right. I mean, it's I don't know the sort of the sort of religious background to quotes versus curly brackets or whatever. Doubtless there are two tribes who don't agree on this for some long forgotten technical reason, but it's important that probably we just pick one and go with it.
But hang on, we have to go back to the term you used, because it's really, really important. You used the term nesting, right? So what we really need to do, have a clear way to communicate to people that these different blocks, what do we call them? Blocks or nestings, or what is the best term?
Modules, maybe?
Sorry?
Maybe modules?
Maybe. Gunther, Adam, do you have votes on this as well? We have modules, nesting.
Components?
Subsections.
Yeah, the
Maybe
nesting,
that's more human.
The nesting was a sort of descriptive term, rather, in the sense of that it's the fact that it's like a Russian doll. I mean, if you think back to, that's the way the old-fashioned TIFF tags worked way back when, the various earliest EXIF. It was just like a set of nested bits and people things. You know, you could have different sets of metadata, and each sort of topic might have 3 or 4 things within it. And in a sense, you could represent it drawn out as an outline tree sort of thing.
Now, Mark, that makes a lot of sense. I think we all agree with that. But the thing is, what we're trying to say here is that the thing that starts with the @ sign, that is a chunk. Like the @ headings, we have a kind of a JSON for that. There's debate in the community whether it's correct JSON or not, and that's a valid discussion. But right now, I just want to find a way to tell people that if you want to put Dublin Core or JSON or whatever it is, you put it in a nest, a module, a subsection, you guys are the clever coder people. What do you think is the best term for it?
Well, you could say a wrapper, quite literally, you know, because your at name curly bracket stuff to corresponding balanced curly bracket is what you are packaging up and placing, you know, nesting inside your visual meta.
And should that nesting be from starting from the next line after that at sign until you reach ending bracket or closing bracket? Is that the...
Well, assuming the outer pairs balance, I mean, if we assume that, be it human or machine, that we do sufficient error checking, that we, you know, don't make escaping errors or whatever.
Okay.
You're right. So these are the things we need to define the elite. So you're going to need to escape at minimum an at symbol and open and closing curly bracket.
Possibly not the, yeah. Maybe not the at symbol.
Well,
Because
unless
you
it's the beginning
can-
of the line, you're quite right. If it's, well, unless it's at the beginning of the line, which is...
Or
probably
even
not.
you could like, until the first bracket is closed, you
Yeah.
can have whatever symbol, but you can't have a closing bracket earlier on.
So basically, no, you're right. So to parse to the end of the section, you're probably looking for a single curly bracket and two line breaks. Which then imposes, well, the problem then is that, well, that also presupposes that you found the nested bracket, because of course the content inside could contain a line break, you know, a line starting with a closing curly bracket followed
Yeah.
by a line
And,
break.
and same
perfectly valid.
thing. Same thing with titles of you could have a closing bracket or a open closing bracket inside a title. So we need to either, yeah, we probably need to escape them. That is,
Now,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
There's one other approach to escaping. Let me just paste this in.
No,
This is what the New Web Literate Programming System does, and it uses an at sign before the delimiter, both
Oh,
on the opening and the closing.
Oh,
in order
right,
to
okay,
distinguish it from
sorry, guys, you've been doing stuff in the text chat that I haven't access to read. You're talking about embeddings and envelope and so on. And Peter, you wrote a long one at anything at with a, okay, hang on.
That was just a snippet of the documentation from New Web to show what their notational convention is.
so, but yeah, just my 2 cents. So take it or leave it. But as I said, there are 2 aspects. The first aspect is what we want to decide, what's the minimal amount of description that we want to have and in which format. Okay, well, it's not so easy to decide, but we'll certainly come to a conclusion at some point. Another part is, of course, then the question, what do you want to embed in that envelope? And yeah, there are conflicts, of course, with different formats, and but I think we should be rather careful, because if you want to have a very rich metadata description, then there is simply no way around a dereferenceable source which can be queried. So, I mean, that's the entire point, because at some point you probably want to interact with that data. And so, but if we want to include the entire world and all escaping mechanisms, yeah, it could get very complicated. And at the very least, by the way, if people send in their visual meta, you need some sort of validator too. And these are all things that that have to be designed, written. So I think we should not conflate these 2 aspects of having an open description. You can have very rich interaction with the metadata, but only in a network. And then the part that, of course, goes in the book. And yeah, so.
Okay, so
This
so
is
the
just my
escaping
comment on this.
is a big deal. That's partly what you're all saying, right? And what you're saying, Victor.
Yeah, not only escaping, but I mean, people can get crazy here, include meta and so yeah, you have to be careful because the language is
I can't hear you very well, Günther. You're a bit crackly right now.
Yeah, just saying that grammars don't mix very well. So there's a limit because, you know.
Okay, so what we need to do clearly is to define how people can say there's something happening and then there's custom stuff and then there's custom stuff end. These things are really important, right?
I think if I another thing, if I've understood correct from Günther, is really that what we want to sort of encourage people not to put the whole kitchen sink in this, because the point is this is something, you know, by its intent is printed digitally at the back of the work. So if you want to put, you know, 2 terabytes of data set in there, that's not really what it's intended for. That should definitely be referenced. And it might need a reference not only to the, well, it could just call it as a reference saying what type of thing it is. And that's very much sort of compliant with the concept of the semantic web.
I'm not sure if that's necessarily the case. If let's say that we invent a typeface that's based on tiny dots, so we can actually print something to look like a QR code at the end of this. As long as we describe what that is and how to read it, I don't mind having 2 terabytes at the end of a document.
Yeah, but
right
it doesn't.
I mean, right now it seems insane, but considering how this kind of technology is progressing, I wouldn't want to design it out. So that's why I think it's so important that the at headings bracket thing and the end bracket thing, that we find a way to specify to people.
It's not that you can't, Frode. It's more thinking. It's just thinking logically at scale. So, you know, if every receipt you print is 2 terabytes long, yeah. I mean, so the point is, well, it's what you can. It's the difference between can and should.
I don't have a problem with that. When I used my computer in the 90s, sitting hanging out with Doug, showed him a screensaver, he was like, oh, wow, right? His entire memory for everything he did in the demo was less than it took to take a single screenshot from my laptop, my normal consumer laptop. So the idea of 10 terabytes of a receipt cannot be designed out. It's insane. Of course.
But you're missing the point. We're not saying don't. We're not designing it out saying you can't do it. That just pointing out that it would be more sensible to link to it, because sorry, go ahead, Adam.
The alternative is also saying that we have an augmented PDF, which is a zip file with the plain old dumb PDF, and beside it is a big 1 terabyte file of data that is in the native data format that you can also, if you really want to, you can print it as a PDF and append it and put it in the archive, but usually you don't.
Yeah.
So why put it in the PDF and not beside the PDF and zip it up together? Because
there is no such thing as beside in the model that I'm looking at, because you just never know where 2 pieces of data are going to be separated. So if someone wants to do exactly... Shouldn't everything be on the same page with the same logic? I don't see that logic. It's really... No, it doesn't make sense. I remember once being confused, kayaking with Ted Nelson, not trying to name drop, but that was a very wonderful day. And I talked to him to kind of unthink how we're doing things today. And I said, you know, what is a file? Just asked him questions just to get his perspective. And he basically, in his normal TED style, dissolved everything so that everything is kind of a human construct in a computer. What I'm doing here is just accepting that for the foreseeable future, a PDF is a thing and that it could be printed out as a thing. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if we put this on IPFS and all these other things, of course, the underlying stuff becomes something else. I accept that. So in terms of should it be on 1 page, ideally. If it goes on more pages, it breaks a little bit of the logic I said. I completely buy that. But I'm not fighting you guys at all on this point. If someone wants to put in, here is a thing, and here is a link to where there's more information about this thing or more data about this thing, fantastic. There's no reason it shouldn't happen. Absolutely fine. But I think that for the basics, we should design it as though all the metadata is in one of these blocks. Right? And because it's, in a way, I feel it's a little bit of a cop-out saying, we've designed visual meta, but you need to go to this other place to get it because it was a bit big.
But
So
what I proposed was a different thing, that you have a document, which is an augmented PDF, which is basically a zip file, one thing that you can download and have on your burnt to a disk or encoded as a QR code on a Chromium plate somewhere for the archives. And that is a singular thing. But I'm saying that you can't put the whole new data format and the whole web into a PDF. It's total insanity, even if you want to do that, because the zip file would be the same thing as the one unit you want. That is what I'm saying. Not referenced on the network service, but zipping it together in some way, but not putting everything into a vector file.
I don't mind that being an extension, but the reason Visual Meta was invented was, the process was, I first thought, okay, at the end of a PDF, why don't we take the original document, export it as XML, and put it in and make it really tiny and white, so it would disappear. That was one of the things. Another one was take the entire source document of whatever format it was, Word or whatever, and put it in there. And then I tried to hide it by having it as a zip thing inside, which I know is not what you're saying, but I tried that thing, and almost all of these security issues came up. PDF reader said, this is not standard, we don't like this. So when you're talking about packaging basically a simple and a big in a big zip, I have no problems with that, but I would think that would be an extension. I think first what we need to do is, for most use cases, which will have the BibTeX, some structural stuff, maybe a little bit extra, just get that down. Because the next level would be, how do you encode what the different graphs have? As in talking about just X, Y, and all of that stuff. We will have to get to that, but we haven't really nailed down even how to say that this is a special bit of stuff.
Well, to avoid the rabbit hole, then I suggest we park the issues of extensions and inclusions to one side, because we've said inherently we're thinking of an open structure, so we can nest other stuff inside. But otherwise, I can see we'll get into one of these things where we're all arguing in agreement with one another. So if we concentrate now on just the outer wrapper and getting that tied up, because actually some of the things we need to answer doing that, the point Adam's brought up about the different BibTeX BibTeX field enclosures and things, this is all pertinent. So we will be addressing some of the things we need to do with sort of deeper inclusions in probably doing the first bit. Does that sort of make sense to people? And I'm also mindful, there's also this thing, and when we talk about what you can put into things, is that I think I've learned enough along the way that expecting people to do, myself included, to do anything sensible with something they only half understand is a bit of a fool's game. It's not that we're deliberately sort of delinquent, it's just we do things more out of lack of knowledge than any degree of malfeasance.
Yeah, I appreciate all of this so much. I'm just moving this bit up because I want it to be a bit easier to read, because this isn't, of course, it's so weird here now. Let's see, no, it won't let me. Okay, I'm just going to leave that. Can I put in a line? God, WordPress is just not that useful, is it? Okay, just
this is easier than writing HTML code.
Well, that's arguable, right? Okay, so okay, how about, can you guys please read this sentence either on your computer or, sorry, this paragraph or here?
Okay, structure vision.
I can break it up a bit. Whoops, sorry, everyone. That's not what I meant to do. I'll just leave it.
Person to find DOI.
Where are you?
Line 4, beginning of the line. Or 4 lines up from where you are. Second line on the screen. Find DOI.
And
The parsing, thank you.
Or
Yeah. Sorry, the thing is in the way. Let me just get out of, right.
That same paragraph has become a bit of a run-on because you've got a 3-line sentence as a parenthesis there. So you've got DOI. I found it was hard to read through.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it in my own first language. So,
The structure of visual meta starts with a simple intersection to announce its presence.
no apostrophe. It's a possessive. It's, yeah.
You're possessive.
Such as rehearsing a DOI.
so when you say the intersection, do you mean the at visual meta section?
Yes. Depending of, hang on, that's a very good question, actually.
And one thing I wonder if both of the first line visual meta start and visual meta the version number and the generator, if those two can be combined.
No, because visual meta itself may be updated some point, and the generator is just the software that made it.
Yeah, no, I mean the line before it, visual meta start, because it's a bit repetitive. Visual meta start and visual meta the first 2 lines. To me, they look the same.
Are you? No, they're not the same.
It's the visual meta.
Right, one's the meta wrapper and the other's the wrapper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is really important. This, oh God, you guys, you're very clever, but you have no idea how appreciative I am of your help for this. So I guess this should be called announcement.
Yeah.
How about the preamble?
Well,
No.
it's actually because it's the overall wrapper, because it's, I mean, this wraps everything, doesn't it? Because the visual meta start balances to a visual meta end. But I'd agree it is a preamble.
Does that make sense, though?
Or since it comes at the end of the document, we could call it the postamble.
I'm going to move this suggestion. I'm going to delete it from here. I'm going to put it in a message to myself for putting in a separate page for advanced stuff, because I think it's very important. But I think it should be clear to people that, you know, that they can just follow it down.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So we don't have the ending. So I have this here. You know, that's crazy. The description.
That is the postamble. The postamble to the postamble.
But who is this page for?
This page we're working on right now.
Yep. Who is it for?
This is for someone who will maybe implement visual meta.
Well, I think in fairness, probably where we are, this is iteration 1. So this is going to branch, I suspect, when fully done, because the technical thing will need more technical writing to it. And that will be too complicated for the general reader. But I think this is this useful exercise of just writing it out to actually begin to understand what we don't know about it and what's ambiguous.
Yeah, but it can be good to know who it's ambiguous for, because as a programmer, I have very different requirements here.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to. I mean, there's several things. One thing we have to do, that I have to do after this, is take all of this into a new page and just have the visual meta by itself, the exact same text, so someone can just read it as a big thing. Here I'm trying to explain some of it, and because WordPress is awful, I can't easily have a different colored font that's a note.
yeah.
So that's why the headings are very, very long.
The way I sort of am reading it in my mind at the moment is this is a sort of halfway house between the two things. It's not a strict, it's not the textual description, and it isn't the fully technical one. But it's sort of saying, this is what it looks like. You know, these are the parts that we'll see. Now, from the fully technical thing, obviously that will want a lot more belt and braces and dealing with the edge cases and ambiguities. But it's probably useful to just walk it through and says, okay, so you expect one of this, and then you expect one of these, and then you expect, you know, and so we get until we get down to the end point.
Yeah, I mean, this page, I apologize, is actually a mess, because I'm talking about structural and then description and paratext. It's all over the place.
Well, that's all right. I mean, it's you know, all these things will take a bit of mashing to get together. It's you know, it's just start the journey.
Oh, also in the chat, I posted a link to the nested text standard. I think I emailed you guys that a while back, but that's another attempt to deal with nested blocks of things in a more human-friendly notation.
Yeah,
it was trying to remedy some of the problems with the YAML standard, because YAML had like 16 different ways to represent a nested block of content. Actually, it was even higher. They said like one way you could look at it, you could interpret like 100 some odd permutations.
Then you need a nested standard to interpret what all those interpretations are.
Well, basically, there were options to allow you to control whether or not to strip leading and trailing white space, and whether to preserve white space within the nested document or not. So the whole thing, when you ran all the permutations, it was insanely high.
Yeah. Which sort of begs the question, is there a, sorry, Adam, I cut across you.
No, to continue.
I just wonder if there is a sort of meta set of these rules, because this must come around like a merry-go-round for anyone programming, in the sense that these are sort of error detection patterns, for want of a better word, that we, many of which we now know. They may be implemented different ways by different systems, and differently according to the age of those systems. But I'm wondering if there's a resolved sort of list of them that we should be using as a reference, you know, rather like the thing that Peter's kindly just pointed out, in terms of avoiding potential ambiguities or equally problematic sort of schisms between different visual meta users who want to go down different paths to do the same thing.
Yes, visual meta holy wars.
Don't put Emacs in the header. You'll piss off half the audience.
I can see somebody now insisting it should just be an S expression.
A what?
Symbolic expressions from Lisp, just nested parens only for all delimiters.
That sounds like fun. Okay.
But it makes it easy for the guy writing a parser.
Just trying to get this straight now. So
the one thing we could also have is a long page with 10 different examples of articles, books with different kind of different valid visual meta examples.
Yes, and also, I mean, in going about that, I think it's often quite useful to sort of also include in that sort of appropriately highlighted sort of bad examples, explaining I accepting people are going to want to do this, and the reason that you might do that a different way, or not do this thing because of the problem it will cause. Because otherwise what tends to happen is people think, I'll stuff it, I'll just go ahead and do it anyway because that's what I want to do, and I don't know another way around it.
We can follow the linguistics convention of putting a star before all of the bad examples so that you know that it's a bad example before you start reading it.
Yes, because it's too late. You can, by that point, yes, we've consumed and memorized the bad example and forgotten that we're not supposed to remember it.
I think this is correct now, at least in terms of the flow. So we start with a basic human description, following by announcement of visual meta. That's got then the intro of the versioning and so on, the citing, which is BibTeX, structural, which is currently in JSON, and then finally paratext, like references, glossary, and all of that stuff. Then we have minimum requirements. Visual meta must have intro and descriptive. Optional is stuff, custom extensions, and so on. External references, and then we go into the example, right?
I think you just got a slight run on there between when you went to optional. You started with the bits, and then you used a slightly different context of description. So you're saying you're expecting this, 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 and this, and then in the same heading level, you then say, well, you can put extra bits, but that doesn't say where. So I'd almost split that apart with another heading.
Okay, where was that?
So go scroll up a bit. Right. So minimum requirements wants to be a different heading level to optional, because the optional, the custom extensions. Well, you need to separate that off from the bit before, because what you're now referring to is you're now referring to the section above. And as it flowed down the screen, I thought it all rather ran together. So it wasn't signposting to me as a new reader that I'm now sort of stepping out of that first section and now reflecting back upon it.
I think I've done what you said. So structure, blah, 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 minimum requirements, optional. Oh, no, actually, that's a bit not logical.
How about replacing minimum requirements with, let's see, well-formed visual meta components, and then you can have minimum requirements at the same level as optional and custom.
Hang on, 1
But
second.
have the notion of well-formedness.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. Okay, just before I do that, so structure, minimum requirements, optional, custom extension, external references, and then we have a huge thing, and that's the example. That works, right? Okay, so where should we put what you just said? Is that in under minimum requirements, the well-formedness?
Well-formedness would be above minimum requirements. Then minimum requirements would be the first element of being well-formed, followed by the optional and custom. Because the notion is that a well-formed document has the minimum requirements, then it also has optional elements and custom elements.
Sorry to leap it. I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to cut and run. Bad time, because it's obviously a useful discussion to go on. But anyway, hopefully I managed to add something, and I shall catch up with the recording later. Bye all. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye.
You take care.
That's really annoying because Emily's on her way home, and I may have to leave too, which is horrible. Okay, so minimum requirements, doesn't that's not just in terms of content, it also should have about being well formed, right?
Well, you could do it either way. You could say that a well-formed document consists of the minimum requirements plus the optional stuff, or you could say that the minimum requirement is that it be well-formed, and well-formedness. I'd put well-formed above minimum requirements and then have minimum requirements under well-formed, and then optional can be at the same level as minimum requirements, to my mind. The key notion is to be well-formed, it has to have the minimum requirements, but it can also have the options and the extras.
I don't understand why, but I accept that you understand how these communications are, so that's fine. You don't have a problem with that, do you, Adam?
I don't really know what we're doing here right now.
Okay,
But-
but right now we're just saying the key thing I want to get done today, and I think we can do it quite soon, is to let someone come in. Let's say they've been given a job of implementing visual meta. They don't really care. They look at
Right,
this,
so-
they find this is the minimum stuff. If I do this, my boss will be happy.
Right, well-formed visual meta, well-formed visual meta document consists of colon, then minimum requirements, optional, and the other. Because what a language implementer is going to be looking for is something talking about what a well-formed document consists of.
Yeah. There are
That right
many,
away, the minute they see well-formed, that's going to cue them to what part of the document they want to be going to when they're starting their implementation work.
and what we haven't really discussed here is many syntax details, like how to handle line breaks, how to handle brackets correctly.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's just finish this sentence first.
Yep.
A well-formed visual meta appendix, when I capitalize that, includes the minimum requirements
And any optional elements.
Would it be possible to do this also in some sort of shared document product, where we can comment and have more thoughtful, like, thoughtful comments and discussions on the, like, I know you hate Google Docs, but something Google Docs like, because WordPress is not much better than Google Docs.
I think I think not just because, I mean, I was thinking about now trying to copy the whole thing into Google Docs, but I think what would be better is if you take a bit that you want to discuss. Do you have a blog or some sort of thing? Because, or even if, let's say you disagree with something here, you copy that, you go to our community here, and then under discussion, you paste it.
Yeah.
And then you refer to it, because that means we keep that dialogue of why we disagree. That's really crucial.
Because we have quite a few bits to both in terms of syntax and what's reasonable to have in the visual meta, but it's, like this.
Yeah.
How do we follow up on all those things? Because as an implementer, we really need to nail these things. It may not look important to a casual reader, but anyone who's working in programming really need to have that information in some way.
Okay, so what I would really like, and unfortunately I have to go because it's raining and my family is getting
off. But we can follow up on this another call.
I think what we really need is a formal grammar for it.
Yeah, but hang on, just to reply to Adam first. I would, you guys make decisions. If I disagree, that's fine, we disagree, but instead of waffling, if you write a blog post or something that says, in visual meta, it has to be this way, or it has to be that way, right? Then I can very easily later on, not here, add a link to it here. It's like, some of this is gonna have to go to other pages too, like optional minimum probably shouldn't be on the same page. But I can say, here's a link to the grammar of how this has to be handled. You know, currently, I call that implementation notes. So that's just some of our earlier chats. Hang on a sec. No, I want to go back to the main page. Yeah, implementation notes. Just a few things. Guiding principle, approach. You know, so or maybe if you want, Adam and Peter, comment on this page and saying on the implementation notes, we have to state the grammar so and so. That would also be really useful. It's part of the comments, and then we'll lift it up here.
The thing is that this is a very technical discussion, but it's also a discussion. It's not just me stating it should be like this. So it's a kind of a hard thing to discuss with a layperson or other. But it's also it's not a thing that a single person may or that I should decide
Yeah, but
So it's a-
that's why, let's think of it as an RFC. You state, I think it should be thus. And then Gunther and Peter will look at it and either agree with you or not.
That sounds good.
Because otherwise, if there's too much polite discussion, we get nowhere, right? So be a dictator, but don't be a dick. You know what I mean? You write down, I think it should be like this, and then we either do that or something.
Now,
like
here's
that.
one question.
Yeah.
In some languages, they adopt the convention of being very forgiving in what they accept, but being very strict in what they output. In others, they'll be strict both in what they accept and in what they output. So your choice is throw an error if there's an extraneous space, or if you can recognize what the person really meant, accept the extraneous space on input, but get rid of it when you generate the output. So it's a question, do you want to throw errors or do you want to try to be forgiving?
Peter,
And-
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, it's something that comes up when you're writing
No,
parsers and grammars for meta formats.
I understand the basics of it. Like, for instance, one thing that was very useful in a URL, at the end of the URL, you can write all kinds of stuff. So that's a forgiving way, because if the reading page knows what that is, it can do things. So I understand a little bit of what you mean, but in terms of how it fits here.
This is more like, are you going to mandate that indentation be executed with 3 space characters in a row for each level of indentation? Or will you require them to use a single tab for each level of indentation? Or do you write your grammar to take either one and deal with it?
Embarrassingly, I have to run, but I would like this to be flexible, because as long as a human can write a parser for what is relevant to them, or in a couple of 100 years, AI doing it automatically, as long as it's clear like that, I don't want to impose any control or difficulties just for elegance or something.
Then I think the only thing that you really need to mandate is that you not mix spaces and tabs for indentation. Either use a consistent number of spaces or a consistent number of tabs.
We don't do any indentation. I think that's one thing, just to save space, no indentation. It has to be with the escaping the funny.
Okay, that eliminates a whole slew of problems. So that's a good move.
Wonderful, gotta go.
Yep.
I'm again so appreciative of what you guys are doing. I look forward to any written perspectives how it should be, and I look forward to seeing you on Monday.
Okay, have a good weekend.
Okay, you too.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.